First of all, I do not use the phrase, Russia must be defeated. I say instead, Russia must not win this war. I believe these are two very different issues. What do I mean by saying that Russia must not win this war? I mean that Russia must not ultimately benefit from launching this attack on Ukraine and starting this war. It must not emerge from this war as an entity which has benefited from it. It must emerge from this war as an entity which has lost out. It must be done in such a way that not just Russian authorities, but the Russian people themselves realize that the war simply did not pay off. Not only did Russia lose hundreds of thousands of soldiers who died on the front lines, but it generally made Russia more impoverished because of this war. So it's not a question of victory over Russia, certainly not some sort of victory parade in the Red Square as some may imagine, because it's not realistic. It's about showing them that a violation of international law did not pay off, and that it was not worth it. This is something that I fight for, and I really hope that the policies of the most immediate future, most notably policies by President Trump and the new American administration, will make this happen. I am referring to the most important role because it is not a secret that America is the world superpower, with the strongest economy and the world's strongest armed forces. It requires international cooperation, and that's something I, as Ukraine's neighbour, encourage every step of the way. If you allow me to explain briefly, the United States will not be able to accomplish everything alone. Hence, when I talk to European leaders, I say to them, we are countries with access to the Baltic Sea. Let us act in such a way that it does not allow the Russian Shadow Fleet to operate freely in the Baltic Sea. Let us carry out regular inspections of these ships. Let us constrain the capabilities of the Russian Shadow Fleet to move around the Baltic Sea. This will also constrain their resources. Let us at least control Russia's capability to sell their resources. Let us control the insurance of these ships at the very least, and let us stop them if they fail to comply with international requirements on maritime navigation. Let us impose sanctions on Russia. Let us do it jointly, and let us ensure we adhere to these sanctions ourselves. And of course, let us continue supporting Ukraine, both militarily and on a humanitarian level, as much as possible.
Mr. President, to your point, the sanctions have been effective, but only to some extent. Would you like to see President Trump pushing forward with harder sanctions on Russia, particularly in the oil and energy space, in order to bring Putin to the negotiation table?
I must say that I was very pleased and hopeful to hear President Trump's speech during the Davos summit. I am of course referring to the World Economic Forum in Davos, which was held back in January. Some of the issues we covered centered on how to help Ukraine. We also attended an annual meeting, which we call the Ukraine Breakfast, where we talked exclusively about the situation in Ukraine and ways to support Ukraine effectively. President Donald Trump said during his speech there, as you have mentioned, that it's the price of oil and gas that will be worth playing against Russia in order to constrain the income it generates from the sale of these resources. And of course, we must not allow Russia, under any circumstances, to be allowed to reopen and operate Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. It must absolutely not be allowed to happen, because in my view, the opening of the gas pipeline and facilitating deliveries was one of the reasons for Russia's decision to invade. I hope that President Donald Trump, who in 2020 imposed sanctions on Nord Stream 2 construction companies, who effectively stopped this investment, will continue with this policy and not allow Nord Stream 2 to reopen again. Both Nord Stream gas pipelines generate enormous income for Russia, and both Nord Stream gas pipelines are very powerful weapons in Russia's hands because they lead to gas energy domination over Europe. Europe should have diverse gas supplies. It should be obtained by European countries, most notably by the EU, from different sources, which can be ensured by gas terminals. That's why we built a gas terminal in Poland, to allow us to obtain gas from various sources, which allowed us to become independent from Russia. Nowadays we get gas from Norway's shelf. We get gas from our own energy terminal, gas which reaches us from Qatar, gas which reaches us from the United States through interconnects. We also gain gas from Klaipėda gas terminal in Lithuania. Gas exports from the US to Poland was one of the successful achievements during Donald Trump's first presidency, because it was thanks to his decision that big contracts were signed between US and Polish companies. I really hope that President Donald Trump will now return to this offensive US policy in respect to energy markets, but also on European energy markets, because it is my personal view that it is beneficial to Europe. It relies on the rule that you need to act in such a way to ensure that it's a win-win situation for both parties. And this is the case here. Europe benefits, and the US as a gas exporter benefits too.